And I noticed in passing last week, you talked about birds and birdsong, I think. We certainly talked about your love of birds and being an ornithologist, a twitcher, as we say in the UK. And it occurred to me, why don't we have a bird of the week? To which
Why
you
not?
readily responded, gladly.
Yes, well, and I always chuckle a little bit inside because I am far from an expert. I'm pretty much, what I really enjoy is being out in nature, looking at nature, and bird songs have always just, if I'm out in nature and it's silent, can be a certain awe to it, but I kind of anticipate and expect hearing birds.
Yeah.
And when they're not there, sometimes it feels a little bit eerie. It's like, what's going on? There's no birds. So the habit I've gotten into is learning to identify a bird, to see it. And then if I already know, it's like, oh, great, I know this one. But if I don't, then at some point after it flies away, then I try to look it up and see what it was I was just looking at.
Yeah,
but in the meantime, I'm also listening to see if I can hear what sounds it's making, because so often you hear the birds long before you see them.
Yeah.
And if you know what to anticipate to see because you've heard the song, then you're more likely to be able to make a positive identification. Yes. Beyond that, identifying, learning their habitats and their migration patterns and all the other things you can learn about birds, even their flight patterns, how they flap their wings and where they go up or down, all those kinds of things. I'm not my forte at all. I haven't even really tried to study it. I'm just trying to get to know the birds. And then the challenge in Portugal is that the birds I'm already familiar with in English have a different name.
Yes,
it's a Portuguese name.
Yeah.
Also, coming from the United States, there are very few birds in Europe that also reside in North America. So that's new too. Like virtually every time I see a bird for the first time, it's the first time. In American English, you call it twitching. In British, we call it birding.
Birding, right? Okay.
Yeah, birding. But so the life list, which is how I, like I said I think it was last week, I collect certain things that are special to me. So yes. Mugs that have I've learned that they're very easy to travel. They don't take up much space, so I'm not like filling up a house with collectible stuff, but have meaning to me. Like I can look at the mug and remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when I found that mug and purchased it, which is usually when I'm traveling and going to new places. So birding is very similar. I identify a bird. I can almost always remember the very first time I saw that bird and what I was doing when I saw it. Yeah. So there's a certain collectible kind of a feel to it for me, as opposed to a scientific or educational kind of like I'm going to learn a lot about this bird. So I'm going to learn to identify it, see if I can identify its sound and its appearance, see if I can identify the variations in that bird, because males are often different from females in size and color. And then gulls altogether, I was thinking about that when you brought this up yesterday. It's like, gulls to me are like me not listening to Portuguese being spoken around me. It's just so many varieties and so many things to consider and think about. The brain for me just starts going, so I never mind. So with gulls, it's the same, because each species has generally 4 different appearances depending on how old it is.
Yes.
And sometimes there's a difference between male and female. So if you've got 16 different gulls, you've got 64 possible identifications for every one gull that you look at. It's like, too much.
Yes. Isn't it funny? And there's only one kind of gull, isn't there, when you're a kid, and that's that shape.
Yes.
In the sky. That's right. That's it. And yeah, there is a lot of complexity, isn't there? And a lot to learn about seabirds for sure. Of which they're an important constituency, aren't they, of the Portuguese birds? So I think this I was going to say this feature's got legs. It's got wings. It's got wings. This
Both.
feature, and people are responding already. Okay, we have some bird talk coming in then, and we will reveal our bird of the week for this week that you've chosen. It's a bird song I think that many people are familiar with. T-Duck, of course, has a bird of the day every day. I don't know what it is, though. You're going to have to give us more help on that, T-Duck. No birds mean earthquake, either that or it's eating time. That's an interesting comment, JMC. Yeah, when the birds go quiet, there's usually a good reason for it.
Yeah, well, for all the birds to go quiet all at the same time, there's the earthquake possibly. I don't know. I haven't seen the research, but certainly potential predators. Sometimes that'll set out alarm calls, but oftentimes the talk about preparation, the readiness aspect is they go quiet.
Yes.
Shh, be quiet. Don't talk. Don't move.
Yeah. Yes. Something's happening.
So often when there are, it's an interesting irony. I think it's an irony. When birders or twitchers are out looking for birds, there's usually a group of them walking along. And what I learned early on is the birds spread out in a big circle to get as far away as they can, but still to where they want to be. So it goes really quiet. You don't see any birds. And then you walk another, 100 meters and they all close in behind and get back to what they were doing. And it gets even worse when you have dogs, because they've really learned that, some humans, they're just like, what are they doing? They're just kind of looking at us. But dogs like, oh, watch out. They're going to chase us. They're going to try and kill us. So they really clear out. Yeah. So the frustration for me is if I'm out in nature and I'm just starting to see or hear where birds are, and then people walking dogs start coming along, they all just go away. It's like,
no, all right, okay. Shut up, you idiot. Right.
So that can make it quiet too, the presence of potential predators.
Yeah.
I had I got I have several bird apps. So most of them now have the sounds of the birds.
Nice,
so
yes.
I used to take my phone and set up like a red-tailed hawk, which is a known predatory bird. And there would be all kinds of birds in my backyard, that, usually on the ground or in the bushes. And I would put it on just to see if they could distinguish that this is an electronic sound or a real one. And I don't think they care. They just hear the sound. They go, we're gone. It was really interesting to see and to observe. And then, of course, my kids went, oh, let me do it. Let me scare the birds. Like, no, this was a scientific experiment. One time only. I just wanted to see what happened. I don't want to scare the birds away.
Have you seen in the Vasco da Gama shopping center, the way they deal with the pigeons there is to have a hawk? And,
okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I was in the in a mall yesterday, and the pigeons and gulls were trying to come and get the food. And they had a plastic owl to try and scare the birds away there. And I don't think it works very well. Or it does, because in the way that at the Vasco da Gama Center, the hawk owner who walks around with the bird of prey just does a sound like the pigeons are now attuned to that, so they just move on a little bit. They don't fly away; they just move away.
Yeah.
And this person has to walk around the Vasco da Gama Center, just hustling the birds along a little bit.
Just a little whistle.
Yeah, it's the same where there's this plastic owl. They just don't sit near the plastic owl. They sit a bit further away.
Well, and I mentioned dogs earlier. They've been used where Canada geese have become a nuisance around, metropolitan ponds and lakes, grassy areas, because they're notorious for just pooping all over everything. So you can't even walk on the grass without I'm just walking on goose poop.
That reminds me of the Mrs. M saw a fantastic bit of film of the peacock, or one of the peacocks in Caldas through the window of one of the novelty shops there. I'll call it a novelty shop. And it was doing its full display. But those peacocks can lay down quite a lot of what should we call it? Free gifts. Guano, I think, is a technical term.
Yes, well, all birds do, obviously, but often the bigger the birds, the bigger the poop. No,
absolutely,
no surprise.
Isn't that a Portuguese saying? The bigger the bird,
more than likely, yeah. So gulls clearly, and they're known. There's lots of jokes about them like looking out for humans to
Yeah.
drop something on.
Direct hit. And
But
yes, good luck if you get hit. Well, especially because it's not me, it's you that got hit by by the droppings. Now, I imagine the droppings of this species are quite small. And let me just take away the frame so that you can see this. This is bird of the week then, James, of the first in our series.
Yes, this is the male version. The other was a female. It was relatively short notice, so you can see a substantial difference in coloring. You'd see this brown one and go, I don't know, but you see this one, you go, oh, I know what that is, right?
Yes.
So learning to associate the female it's not always a female. Generally, it's the female that has less colorful plumage. Sometimes it's the opposite, depending on the mating habits of the birds, mostly, or the care for the young. But anyway, I chose this one on sort of short notice because it's really common. I'd be surprised if anyone who's been here for 6 months hasn't seen one of these, because they're all over the place. It's called common, a common blackbird, and this one isn't so black. It's a common female blackbird, or a female common blackbird.
And the name for it in Portuguese, James?
Melru.
Milro, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So good from the vocab point of view as well. And I have put a list of Portuguese birds, the Wikipedia list, and it's the song of this bird, isn't it? And it's very noisy, isn't it? If you startle it, or it can startle you, can't it? As you're walking around a woodland, for example. I know I've been startled by the sudden outburst of blackbird calls.
Yeah, for me, because I've primarily lived in residential areas. I haven't seen flocks. I usually see one, or if I wait long enough, there's almost always the partner of the one that I see. Oftentimes, how I got to know this bird is I heard what I consider to be a beautiful bird song. And I said, what? Because my curiosity is, what bird makes that sound?
Yeah,
that's sort of my initial. So I'm looking around, and it's easy now because I see them all the time. Where I lived, I had a view of just a lawn and a driveway, and they were always in the lawn, I think looking for worms. So I got really familiar. And the striking thing about that particular blackbird, the male especially, is just the bright yellow contrast in the head.
Yeah,
you see that bright eye ring and that bright yellow bill, and you just go, woo, okay, that's pretty easy to distinguish. Another reason I selected it. It's very common, probably see it almost anywhere you go, especially if there's any ground area to feed. And it was easy. It was on my life list. I just did a screenshot of from my bird app, because I said, well, that's a great picture. So,
well, do you know what this is? I'm glad I overheard it and made a little mental note, because this is proving to be a very popular feature here.